So Saturday night, Friday night, Saturday morning, if you will, the state of Minnesota instituted their mandated facial coverings. Several months ago, our governor, Commissar Walz, made the statement that we should all be wearing masks. This was well before his mandate was put in place. That we should all be wearing masks, and I've touched on this a little bit before, because it makes everyone around us feel better. He recognizes that the science behind masks isn't 100%. That there's a lot of talk one way or another about whether or not masks are effective. And we could get into the semantics behind what makes for a mask. Technically speaking, a mask to be effective against a virus needs to be medical grade. It needs to have certain things in place in its construction, in its manufacture. 97% of what you're going to see people wearing in public do not meet those requirements. And I want to say to some degree that's neither here nor there, but it's important for people to note that masks, as we see them today, facial coverings, and that's a very key distinction that was even put out in the governor's mandate last week. He kind of shifted the language from masks to face coverings and allowed for things like scarves and neck gaiters and whatnot. For my job, and a lot of people at their jobs, they have to wear a face covering, and so I wear a neck gaiter. Now, this is probably going to sound hypocritical to people who know my stance on public enforcement of wearing masks or facial coverings in businesses or at organizational meetings that are indoors. And there's some aspects of it that include being outdoors. But my employer has, to some degree, everybody's employer has, to some degree, the right or the authority to mandate that their staff wear face coverings. It kind of goes along with it. Now, there are certain places where that draws, I think, a line can be drawn on that. As they work on developing vaccine or vaccines for COVID-19, I don't know that an employer can force you to take it. But facial coverings, who's going to fight that battle? It's uncomfortable as heck, but you do it. Here's the deal. Private businesses can even require you to wear one if they so choose. It's a private business. The idea of the government mandating private citizens to wear them, as I've talked about in another video in the case of Broward County, Florida, even in your own home, where there starts to not be a gray area, it starts to fall into an area that is really where is your power end and where does my freedom start? And that's the biggest issue when it comes to face coverings. Now, I want to touch on the psychology aspect of this, because our governor said this is psychological, it's emotional, it's mental for our neighbors. It makes them feel better when they see you wearing a mask. It makes people feel safe. Okay, Gov. Wonderful. It makes people feel safe. What if I don't feel safe with people who wear masks? What if it causes me to not be able to trust them because I can't see what their facial expressions, so I can't read their emotions. Some of us are good at reading eyes. I actually am pretty good at that. But that's not the point. If we're going to mandate something without the science being 100% behind it, and then you're going to say this is mostly for the emotional or psychological aspects of our neighbors, and in the psychological aspects of this that are positive, then shouldn't we be looking at the psychological aspects of it for people who don't feel safe around people who wear masks or face coverings. I mean, honestly. And if you're going to mandate facial coverings and masks for safety reasons when it comes to a virus, then you should be mandating that it be a high quality medical mask for everyone. And if you don't have them, you shouldn't leave the house. You should not be in public anywhere if you don't have the appropriate medical grade facial coverings. Period. Now, remember, we were told no one should wear a mask when this all started because we needed to save those medical grade masks for medical professionals in high risk areas. And I think that's a great idea. But now that we're really worried about the uptick in positive cases of COVID-19 in many regions and metropolitan areas especially, I believe the governor should be mandating that if you're going to wear, that we have to wear masks, and those masks need to be medical grade, otherwise you can't go into a business. I mean, that's the only way for this to really make any sense. Now, I've said my piece in that regard, but I want to touch on this. We have no numbers at all that prove or verify that wearing a face covering is making other people safe. None. We can't verify. This is an unquantifiable practice. It cannot be quantified. We do not know. We don't even know that social distancing has had the positive effect that everybody seems to think it did. We don't know that. We do not know. There are states, let's consider South Dakota, where they haven't required face coverings, where they haven't required social distancing, like literally made it a mandate, an edict from their governor. Now, granted, South Dakota's population is nowhere near the population of Minnesota, but it's not, it's not like it's one person every 200 miles. There are some larger cities out there, think of Rapid City in particular, that, it's got a pretty large population. They haven't seen the numbers that others are seeing. And they've not instituted any of these draconian measures. And they're testing too. I mean, there's not a state that's not testing. Are there? And there again, there's an uptick because pretty much everywhere, because the uptick in testing, the increase in testing. But if this is about safety, and I'm going somewhere with this, if wearing a face covering, unquantifiable, they cannot show anywhere how this is preventing COVID-19. And remember, China, everyone in China for the most part wears face coverings. It didn't do anything to stop the spread of COVID-19 in China and a lot of other Asian countries. But remember that. The Chinese Communist Party officials were nailing people's homes shut with them inside of it to keep them from spreading this disease, and they wear masks over there. That region of Asia, they wear masks for everything, and it's got very little to do with viruses and a lot to do with air quality. If this is about safety, and we're going to rely on an unquantifiable variable, such as whether or not face coverings of any kind, whether it be a microfiber or a couple of layers of cotton or cloth of some sort, then I demand that everyone in the state of Minnesota who's not a felon carry a firearm, because it makes me feel safer knowing that the people around me are armed and can protect me if I'm being assaulted or in some way attacked by a vicious thug and criminal. Because I'm far more likely to be murdered, I'm far more likely to be assaulted by a criminal than I am to die of COVID-19. So I insist, I absolutely 100% insist that our state legislature and our governor mandate the carrying of firearms by every single citizen without a felony to make me feel safe. and in fact I think most people who believe in the use of firearms for self-defense would agree with me on this. We should all be forced to get trained. It should be mandated by law. We should all be forced to be trained. We should all be out at a range on a regular basis with firearms instructors mandated by the state, and we should all be carrying guns at all times in the state of Minnesota. Anytime you're in public, especially in a public store like Target or Walmart, or at a convenience store like Quick Trip or Holiday or something like. Well, especially a Holiday in Rochester, Minnesota. But that to me, if this is about safety, I will feel safer if non-felons are carrying guns at all times. And here's why. It is a quantifiable reality that gun ownership and the carrying of a firearm leads to a decrease in violent crime and victim crimes. Period. You cannot dispute that. The statistics from year after year after year, it doesn't matter what year you go to, prove that in those communities, those regions where firearms are carried by a good percentage of people, violent crime goes down. It goes down. And the unquantifiable aspect of that is we don't know how many violent crimes are stopped because somebody realizes that person has a firearm and they're going to keep me from hurting others. We know that women are less likely to be raped if someone is carrying, if she's carrying a firearm or someone with her is carrying a firearm. We know that rape victims now are coming out and saying, I want to be able to carry a firearm for self-defense because it protects me, and I want to be able to protect someone else who may be getting raped. This is a truth. This is a reality. That is quantifiable. And keep in mind that the Centers for Disease Control now track things like murder and rape and gun crimes and crimes that are committed where someone dies as a result of criminal gun activity. The Center for Disease Control, this, as much as they track COVID-19, they also track gun violence. And without fail, law-abiding citizens carrying firearms do prevent crime. They do. There have been a number of municipalities in the United States. I want to say it was Kennesaw, Georgia, several years ago, maybe almost 20 years ago, was seeing an uptick in violent crime within the city limits of Kennesaw, which is a suburb. It's pretty much just part of Atlanta now. But Kennesaw, Georgia, at one point implemented a mandatory firearms ownership within the city limits. I think there was a conscientious objector clause built into their city ordinance that said if you have a strong personal reason why you will not own a firearm, or a religious reason why you will not own a firearm, will not be required. But outside of that conscientious objector exclusion, if you will, or exception, if you will, everyone within city limits of Kennesaw, Georgia, will own a firearm. Now, it doesn't say they have to carry it, but you had to have one within the city limits in your home. The CDC tracks gun violence, tracks violent crimes. So we can use the CDC as a support for mandating that everybody, for the safety of their neighbor, if you're not a felon, must carry a firearm with the appropriate training in the state of Minnesota. I'm actively demanding this right now for my safety and the safety of everyone that I love. Wear a mask, carry a gun. Right now, wear a mask, carry a gun. You have to. It's for my safety. It's for my good. It's for the good of your neighbor. And if you don't care about your neighbor. You don't love your neighbor. You want people to die at the hands of murderers and rapists. That's what you want. If you don't want to carry a gun, you want people to die. That's horrible of you. You are a rotten, despicable individual if you will not go out and take the steps that you need to take to carry a firearm to save people around you. What kind of monster are you that you will not even consider for the safety and the good of your community and the people around you? You are a horrible, rotten person. You are a monster for not carrying a gun. You should do this right now. You should mandate. I want every mayor, I want Kim Norton to demand that the governor mandate firearm carrying for every single person in this state. For the safety of the people of Minnesota. We have to do this now. Don't you understand how important this is? People are dying from gun violence. People are being raped. Children are being kidnapped and sold into sex slavery, and we have the means to stop this. And especially as we defund and get ready to disband police departments and law enforcement agencies across the country, right now more than ever, we need armed citizens, law-abiding citizens, non-felons. We need more people carrying guns. It needs to be mandated. We can do this, Minnesota, if we just rise up and demand and we shake our fist in anger and we get really emotional and we plead. We can get this done. We must. We need to be like Kennesaw, Georgia. Don't you know they're fixing their problems with this? Austria. Switzerland. Everyone in Switzerland is trained in firearms usage. And they've never been invaded. We've got to get this done. It must happen now. If you don't insist on this, if you don't join me in rallying for this, you are a rotten, despicable, evil person who only wants people to die. What's wrong with you? Where's your heart? You're a heartless person. I hope that your children and your grandchildren do not get killed by someone because you refuse to carry a gun. In fact, if you refuse to carry a gun and something happens to your family, you murdered them. You did that. It's your fault. You could have prevented it, but you didn't want to carry a gun for their safety. See how that works? Do you see how this works? And I guarantee you, guns save more lives than any stupid face covering ever will. Promise you. But you don't like guns. Even in Minnesota, the vast majority of people are afraid of guns because they're violent. Oh, they might hurt somebody. Even though the statistics show that that's not the case. The facts show that that's not the case. So let's make an emotional argument on this. I can do it. I can make an emotional argument. But I can also make an intellectual argument. If it's about safety, and if it's about protecting lives, they're equitable in that sense. In fact, firearm argument is probably a stronger argument than any facial covering argument ever will be. So I'm demanding right now that every mayor and every county board and the governor of Minnesota and all of his lackeys, all of his proletariat types, I'm demanding that they get together and come up with a way to make this mandatory. Mandate it. It needs to be done. It needs to be done right now. As always, thanks for watching the video. Thanks for being open-minded. Thanks for listening. I would ask that over here in the corner, somewhere on your screen, you hit the subscribe button. It's important, not for me, but because mainstream media, legacy media, isn't going to get the word out. They're not going to let people who don't toe the established line speak. So for the sake of liberty and for the sake of the defense of this nation, small little independent voices like mine need to be heard, especially the interviews. It's got very little to do with my commentary and a lot more to do with the interviews and the people who are affected when liberties are tread on. So once again, hit the subscribe button, like, subscribe, and share. Thank you very much.